introduce, okay, thank you. We can introduce Dr. Kinsey Brock, who I see has joined us, and very excited about her subject matter, her topic today, which is cold-blooded city slickers, how reptiles make it in our concrete jungles. And Dr. Brock comes with information on this subject as an assistant professor of evolutionary biology at San Diego State University. She also is the curator of reptiles and amphibians at the San Diego State University Biodiversity Specimen Lab, which I believe is a very large collection of specimens for, I know that Dr. Burns talked about that in connection with the tanagers. The focus of Dr. Brock's research is understanding how wildlife persists, adapts, or goes extinct in the face of urbanization. So tonight she will address the subject of how animals deal with the city. And I think it's fascinating. Cities have been part of life on Earth for the past 8,000 years. And in that time, 50% of us live in cities. And it's projected that it will be up to 70% as in how many years was that, Dr. Brock?
By 2050,
By 2050, which
about
is,
25 years from now.
yes, that's really astonishing.
Mhm.
So with that, I will welcome you to our group here, and we're excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Quick disclosure, I have a 3-month-old that's like getting put to sleep right now. So if you hear some baby noises, it's coming from my computer and my husband's on it a few rooms down from here. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you about my research in my lab at San Diego State University. I'm a pretty new professor. I'm in my second year. Well, I just finished my second year and I'll be going into my third in the fall. So what you're going to be seeing today is brand new science that is just kind of fledging, we'll say, for the Audubon Society in my lab with my graduate students. So yeah, like Deborah said, I'm an urban evolutionary biologist, and so today I'm going to be talking to you about cold-blooded city slickers, how reptiles make it in our concrete jungles. Let me just make sure. Yep, my slides are working good. Okay, so right now you're at an Audubon meeting and you're thinking possibly, what do reptiles have to do with birds? Well, some of you being avid birders and probably very good naturalists probably already know this, but birds are just reptiles with feathers. They share a lot of similarities. What you're seeing on your screen right now is a phylogeny that illustrates the evolutionary relationships between mammals down at the bottom and then various kinds of reptiles, including the birds. And what you can see here is that birds and crocodiles are more closely related to each other than anything else, and they share a common ancestor down here with the rest of the living reptiles. So they have a shared ancestry and they're more closely related to each other than they are to any other taxonomic groups. So that shared ancestry means that they have shared biology, right? They're relatives. And so both lay eggs, not surprising, and they both lay amniotic eggs, though in general, birds do provide a lot more parental care than other reptiles do. Though some lizards and even rattlesnakes, we are learning, this is brand new research, do provide parental care. So it does happen in other reptiles more than we originally thought. And birds, as you guys all know, are kind of known for making more elaborate nests than reptiles do, though some birds don't always make such elaborate nests. If you've seen pigeons lay eggs precariously on tall New York City apartment ledges with just a few sticks about. So both reptiles, the rest of the reptiles and birds have scales. Birds just have modified scales, right? Those are their feathers modified for flight. And both have very similar skin or integumentary systems that don't allow them to sweat because they both have this flattened, sort of horny cell layer at the top of their skin. And because neither sweat, that's actually a really important biological characteristic because that determines how they regulate their body temperature. And you can imagine that has big implications in a rapidly warming world. Another really cool thing that maybe not everybody knows about is that they have very similar visual systems. So birds and most other reptiles don't see the same way that we do. So this little figure here on the right is showing you what the human eye can see. You and I see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. We operate in the what's called the visual spectrum from 400 nanometers at the bottom to 700 nanometers at the top. We can see the rainbow, but birds and lizards can actually see into the ultraviolet spectrum. So that's down below 400 nanometers all the way down to 300. And perhaps some of you know this, both birds and other reptiles, especially common in lizards, they've actually evolved ultraviolet coloration on their bodies that we cannot perceive, but birds and lizards do. And that's really important because birds often feed on lizards. And when they have that ultraviolet coloration, birds can see that too. So it has interesting predator-prey dynamics with their shared visual system. And then, maybe like a little bit less glamorously, they, excrete the same way. So bird poop and lizard poop are very similar. They both excrete this uric acid. That's the white material you see in their excretions. They both excrete it through a cloaca, and they're very good and efficient at utilizing water in their diet. And that's why you see the uric acid excreted. So, besides being closely related and having biological similarities, I also want to point out that bird biologists are actually some of the most prolific pioneers in the really young field of urban evolutionary biology. Much of what we know, and we don't know a lot, comes from studies of birds. So there are actually whole textbooks dedicated to the study of urban ornithology, and then also popular science writing like Darwin Comes to Town. If after this talk you become really curious about how life is responding to cities, I highly recommend Darwin Comes to Town. There are really great examples of bird natural history throughout that book based on what we know from research. Um,
Oh,
and this is because, like, we know so much about birds, and ornithologists have been really great pioneers in this field because birds are relatively easy to observe. Unlike other reptiles, birds are pretty conspicuous. We can more easily see and hear them flying around in the city and in the sky, calling loudly. Birds also have a huge following. You are a group yourselves of birders, and you have great community science platforms and networks of professional and amateur researchers, that can monitor nesting success, movement, diet, behavior, all sorts of things with relatively low cost methods. Using binoculars, doing bird counts or point
very.
counts, doing banding, acoustic surveys, or even feeder observations, which are now getting really high tech with the cool feeders that have um, either picture photographs or video that you can record who comes to your feeder in an urban setting. So they're accessible to study. And then also, they have some pretty cool and unique traits that respond rapidly to urbanization. There's a really cool study that came out during COVID that showed that bird song actually changed pitch when traffic because people weren't like commuting into work and traffic sounds changed, bird calls changed, and that happened very quickly. Okay, so we know why we care about like reptiles and birds now. They're similar. We can learn really cool things from studying both, but why do we care about urban evolution? Many people think that, cities are nasty, devoid of life, not important for conservation or biodiversity. So why study this? Well, as Deborah sort of alluded to in the introduction, cities are relatively new, evolutionarily speaking. They're ecologically unique habitats that have been created by us pretty much from the last 5 to 8,000 years. And these cities can vary by climate from hot and dry Cairo to bitterly cold Detroit, Michigan. There are cultural differences among cities. So some are heavily planned to incorporate green space into cities, and some are concrete jungles. But generally, cities have many shared characteristics, such as increased human population densities, high proportion of artificial and impervious surfaces, and higher temperatures than surrounding non-urban habitat that probably has, more green space and potentially, like the shade that comes from having more canopy cover in a more green space outside of that concrete jungle. Cities also have highly modified water systems, and it actually can increase water availability in cities due to maneuvering and diverting water away from natural resources to, feed our water infrastructures for irrigation and for urban water features. And obviously, Las Vegas is a, classic example of this. A green, there should not be grass in the middle of the desert, probably also not a large city in the middle of the desert. And, another shared characteristic is that cities often have few large predatory animals, and they, in general, have an overall reduced predator community, so less diverse predator community. And cities also have a higher prevalence of introduced and non-native species. So this is mostly due to our movement. When we move around from city hub to city hub, whether it's for trade or travel, we intentionally and unintentionally move species with us. And so, like Deborah mentioned, this is important because urbanization is happening fast. Most people now live in cities. That happened around 2010. 50% of us were living in cities. It was 57% in 2023. This trend is just climbing, 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 and it's projected, and we're on our way. We're on track for 70% of humanity living in cities by 2050. That is a lot of people because the population also continues to grow. And this urbanization of the landscape is also increasing in extent. So cities are expanding, but they're also becoming more intense. Cities are getting bigger, more densely populated, louder, brighter, and unfortunately less biodiverse. So this is a map from the United Nations. This was back in 2023. And you can see those red areas, that those indicate areas where there are more than 10,000 people per square kilometer. Those red areas are going to expand across the map over the next 25 years and possibly beyond. So whether we, classically think of them this way or not, cities are legitimate ecosystems, and they can be, I argue, natural labs of evolution. And this is because they have this shared characteristic, right? This repeated replacement of natural elements. So, trees, rivers, lakes, whatever. We're replacing those things with human-made elements, buildings, roads, pollution, people. And so we have this relatively young novel ecosystem that can provide us a lot of really cool opportunities to study how quickly evolution can happen and how fast different kinds of organisms can respond to, dramatic environmental change. And so, a big question that my lab is interested in is how do wildlife keep pace with these rapid changes that we make? These are just some of the species that we study all around the world. This on the left-hand side of your screen, that's Podarcis muralis, or the common wall lizard. That picture was taken in Cincinnati, Ohio, but as I mentioned before, this lizard actually traveled from Italy and was introduced to Cincinnati about 50 years ago. A little boy brought 10 lizards in a suitcase home from a trip from Italy, and now there are thousands and thousands of these lizards all across Cincinnati, Ohio, and you can see they're doing really well. They're, living on the side of a brick building. The middle species was a photo that I took actually on San Diego State's campus. This is Tarantola mauritanica, or a Moorish gecko. If you look at the tail there, you can see this little black nub. It's actually lost its tail and is in the process of regrowing it. This is another introduced species to a city, and it's originally from Greece and the broader Mediterranean, but they're doing fine in San Diego. They have big, booming, spreading populations all over the city. We're not quite sure how they got here, but we know where they came from. And then on the far right, that's an anole, specifically Anolis cristatellus, or a Puerto Rican anole. And these guys are famous because their toe pads, the very tips of their toes there, where you can kind of see they get like a little circle shape there. The person who took this photo, Kristen Winchell, actually studied and found that their toe pads get bigger in urban environments over just a few generations, probably for clinging to smooth surfaces like the fence that you see it on now, as opposed to its native environment where it usually clings to trees that are a little bit more um, like sandpaper and have a rougher substrate where you wouldn't need such a big toe pad to stick to it. And so my lab, we're herpetologists. We study mostly reptiles, sometimes amphibians. We're particularly interested in how lizards and snakes are living in cities. And, these organisms, lizards, snakes, they're good study systems for studying rapid evolution in cities because they're urbanites. They exist in new and ancient cities around the world. And unlike birds, they have limited dispersal ability. That means they can't just fly away from environmental change. They're pretty much stuck there. They can't move great distances over their lifetime. It's not in their nature, it's not in their physiology. So, whatever happens where they are, they kind of have to adapt or unfortunately go extinct. They're ectothermic, and so that makes them very sensitive and intimately tied to their thermal environment or the surrounding temperatures, right? Because these animals have to behaviorally regulate their body temperature. So they need to move in and out of shade or bask in the sun to get their body temperature within a narrow range, so that it can function properly, so that they can digest their food, so that they can be active and go hunting and find mates and reproduce. And lizards also have relatively short generation times. So this means that evolution can act more quickly because you're having more generations more quickly, more opportunities for mutations to happen and for evolution to take place. And so the idea here is that with those quick generation times, potentially lizards, will exhibit the effects of their environment more quickly if they are able to adapt. And so we think that these reptiles can reveal how evolution unfolds on short time scales and how we might be able and reveal like different ways how we can help biodiversity persist in our increasingly human-dominated world. So I'm going to talk to you about four different things that my lab is doing right now. Overall, we're interested in how urbanization influences the evolution of reptiles, their behavior, their physiology, their morphology. We also do genetics, and we're doing all those things also through community science. But first, I want to talk to you about how urbanization influences the evolution of lizard behavior and how it's actually quite similar to what we see in birds. So this is one of our study species. The scientific name is Podarcis siculus, and its common name is the Italian wall lizards. And I have Italian in quotation marks because even though these lizards are from Italy, they get around everywhere. So they're native originally to Italy, Sardinia, and Corsica. So the areas that you see in gray here. And then kind of absurdly also over here, a very disjunct distribution. But mostly these lizards occur on the Italian peninsula. Uh, they have these thriving introduced populations all over Europe and Eurasia. So everywhere you see one of these stars on the map, lizards got taken from Italy and moved to a city, and now there's an established population there outside of its native range. Through genetics, genetic work, and interviews of talking to people, we know that all of these instances, these introductions were made from humans dropping them off, intentionally or unintentionally. Unfortunately, wherever these lizards, these Italian wall lizards, seem to get dropped off at, they tend to outcompete the native lizards. And how is that possible, right? Because you would think that the native lizard, wherever the Italian wall lizard gets introduced to, that a native lizard would have an advantage, right? It's been evolving in that ecosystem, that environment for thousands of years, sometimes millions of years. So how does the Italian wall lizard come in and dominate? Um, so this is a question that my lab is interested in because this is always happening in cities. Uh, Unfortunately, Podarcis siculus, these Italian wall lizards, they're here too. They're in California. This over here on the right is a map of just a few of the introduction sites throughout the United States. And I just also want to point out that I got this figure from a published paper. I know that's not where Kansas is, but apparently the people who wrote the paper didn't. But there is a population in Topeka, Kansas, um, in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and as you can see, the inset in New York, they're in the Bronx, and they're all throughout Long Island. And then on the West Coast over here, they're in LA, and a population that isn't on this map is in San Diego. All of these introductions were intentional, and we know the date that they happened, how many individuals were introduced. And so that's some really great information to know when you're trying to understand how the population has changed through time. And we know that these are independent introductions because we can tell from their DNA and we have firsthand um, like interviews with people that, know what happened regarding the introduction. Another cool thing about these introductions is that they span climatic gradients. So these lizards, yes, they're surviving in cities which have shared characteristics, but these cities differ a lot in their climate. You can imagine that, New Jersey and New York are different than a Kansas, mid-continental climate versus, LA and San Diego that have a more coastal Mediterranean climate. But again, all of these introductions are happening in urban areas. They're happening in cities. So in California, like I mentioned, we have two original introductions, one in LA, one in San Diego. And up in LA, there are scientists at the LA County Museum of Natural History who are meticulously documenting the spread of these lizards. And they know through DNA studies that these lizards are being moved by people from where they've been introduced in San Pedro, LA, where the Red Star is, out to Whittier and some other areas in outer LA. So not only are they expanding on their own, but people are moving them around and then they're expanding out from there. So they're doing quite well. They're spreading here. And we're we know from their DNA that they are originally from Italy. That was the first study conducted. And they're actually from the town of Taormina. So down in the right-hand corner there is a little map of Sicily. The triangle represents Mount Etna, big volcano over there in Sicily. And just on the coast, up from Mount Etna, is Taormina, a really beautiful coastal Italian town. And we know from their DNA that they're from there. So, how did they get to LA? That is the question. Well, some collaborators of mine at the LA County Museum of Natural History were walking all around San Pedro, Los Angeles. It's like a coastal part of LA. And we're asking people, what do you know about these lizards? And finally, they're knocking on doors. They knock on the right front door and find the guy who introduced the lizards. And it turns out he grew up going to Italy on vacations as a kid, went back with his wife years later for like an anniversary trip, thought the lizards were cool, brought 7 of them back in his suitcase, no permits, not okay, put them in his backyard thinking, hey, like I have these lizard pets now. Lizards don't make good pets, and especially like outdoors in your yard, your lawn, because they can get through fences. And so these just 7 lizards, 4 females and 3 males, 30 years later, there are now thousands of them roaming the streets of LA. They're spreading, and people are moving them around, and they're spreading from those new introduction sites too. So I put the star on the map approximately where the backyard is, where they are introduced. Um, and this is just how far they've spread in the past 30 years. So they're moving at a rate of about a half a block per year, which isn't, so fast right now, but it took them a while in the beginning to spread out, but now it's happening much faster. So each year, they're going further and further per year. And unfortunately, as they're spreading, they're outcompeting native Scaloporus lizards. So these are called bluebellies often sometimes. I bet, if you're tuning in from California, you've seen them. You probably have them in your backyard. So my lab is interested in knowing how are these Italian wall lizards spreading and outcompeting a native lizard that has evolved here for much longer. And so here, I just wanted to show you the spread from maybe some of you use the community science platform iNaturalist. These are the lizards spreading over time. So here it was 15 years ago, as far back as iNaturalist data goes. 13 years, 10. You can see just 5 years ago, 3, 1 year ago, present. So they're starting to expand at a much faster rate throughout the landscape. So we're interested in their behavior. And we wanted to know, how do they compare? How do these introduced lizards compare to their ancestors back in Terramina? Maybe going back to the source can give us an idea in how these lizards are taking over. So again, Terramina is this coastal Italian village near Mount Etna. You're seeing Mount Etna in the background there. It's constantly blowing out smoke. It's a very active volcano. We know that the 7 founding individuals from LA were 4 females and 3 males. We know exactly where they were taken from in the village. The guy told us. This village slash city, it's been a human settlement since 390 BCE. So a long time ago, founded by the Siculi people. And these lizards, we think, have long-term, more frequent exposure to humans than the Mount Etna lizards. So they've been living in cities much longer and have been exposed to humans and everything that we come with for much longer. And so one of the questions that we were interested in asking is, do lizards from populations in towns and cities, do they exhibit relaxed fear responses to humans? Are they not as afraid of us? Because they learn that we're not really a threatening predator, um, versus like a snake or a cat or something that they might encounter. So we expected that these Italian wall lizards from Taormina are and LA are less afraid of humans than lizards from, say, the Mount Etna region. Because Mount Etna, it's an active volcano. There haven't really been any permanent human settlements on the volcano. So they're less exposed to humans, but they're more exposed to natural predators like snakes and birds. So, how do we measure lizard fear? This is actually a method that herpetologists have taken from ornithologists, and it's called measuring their flight initiation distance. Obviously, lizards don't fly, but we still call it that. So we approach a lizard from a standardized distance at a natural walking speed. And then we measure the distance between us and the lizard as soon as it runs away. So that's the flight initiation distance in blue there. And you can see on top, that's a longer FID. The lizard ran away when the person was much further away. So that means they have a heightened fear response. They did not let the person get very close. And also on the top there, they have a shorter distance to nearest refuge. So that lizard isn't straying very far from a hidey hole. Okay, they're always like near somewhere that they can duck into to escape predation. So that's an indication that they're less bold. So we have two different measurements here, flight initiation distance and distance to nearest refuge. So these are the ways that we're measuring lizard fear in Taormina. So I have a little video here. This is what would happen when we would walk up to these animals in Italy. So I walk toward it. You can see he's not really seeking refuge and actually starts walking toward where I am and checking me out. So this is the exact hiking path where the guy who introduced them to his backyard got the lizards from. Not very intimidated by me. So what did we find? We found that these village lizards from Taormina are indeed less afraid of humans than the Mount Etna lizards. So we have our flight initiation distance here on the y-axis. And as you go up, flight initiation distance is getting longer. These lizards on Mount Etna, I made the little points look like volcanoes. They did not let us get very close at all. In fact, when you would get anywhere near them, they would run away immediately and right into a little hidey hole. The average difference between flight initiation distances between Mount Etna and Taormina is 120 or 102.9 centimeters, which is pretty big. So Taormina lizards are not very fearful at all. They let you get quite close. And as you can see, one like literally let me touch it, a flight initiation distance of 0. So not very afraid. These village lizards were also more bold than the volcano lizards. So this is a plot of their distance to stopping point where they would run to and stop on the y-axis. And on the x-axis down here is their distance to the nearest refuge. And so points on the diagonal line here indicate that, the lizards used the nearest refuge. They ran right in. Points off the diagonal line indicate that the lizard either passed the nearest refuge or stopped before it. So you can see lizards in the city, they're hardly using refuge, well, maybe about half the time. And then the other half the time, they're actually stopping before a hiding place or running past it and stopping and looking at us. So not really using hiding places too often. So now this is still a work in progress, and we're interested in comparing how the Los Angeles lizards respond compared to their source populations. And so I have students working on this now. We're performing the same, FID behavioral experiments with these introduced lizards in LA and the native Scaloporus lizards that they're out competing. And I wanted to say, because like this is also important to, bird enthusiasts as well. There were no stray cats in Taormina, Italy, which is kind of surprising if you've ever been to Italy or Greece or other places in Europe throughout the Mediterranean. You notice a lot of outdoor cats. But in Taormina, there were virtually none. In Los Angeles, there were there are quite a few outdoor cats preying on lizards there. And what we have so far, we're still collecting more data, but what we know is that the introduced Los Angeles lizards aren't as fearless as their source population from the city of Taormina. And we think that this might have to do with the outdoor cats. So we actually have a student at SDSU, Paco. He's going out with a stuffed cat on a hopefully you could see the pole there. It's just a pool strainer skimmer pole that we tied a stuffed cat to from Amazon. People think that it's a real cat. It's very realistic looking, and we have to reassure them that no, we are not tying real cats to poles. Our animal ethics board would never approve that. But anyway, we're approaching lizards with cats and with humans, and also trying to see how and if they respond differently in cities and outside of cities. So more on that soon. I wanted to show you some research on birds in urban areas because we find the same pattern. So urban birds also have shorter FIDs than their rural counterparts. This is research that was just published in 2021. This particular study was conducted all throughout, you can see places in New York City here. And as, you get more urbanized, so look at Manhattan here in the middle, for example, where the human population size is greatest and pedestrian traffic is greatest, birds let you get really close. They have the shortest FIDs versus Staten Island, which is more rural, though there are still people there. You can see the birds, these are pigeons actually, they don't let you get as close. And that's what these graphs are also showing you on the left-hand side. So you have your flight initiation distance here. It's getting, longer. Birds are more scared and wary as you go up. But as human population size goes up, they get less scared of you. And as pedestrian traffic goes up, they get less scared of you. So it's a little bit of desensitization, I think, to human presence over time. It's advantageous, right? Most of us aren't going out with our, pistols shooting birds in cities. They learn that we're not really a threat, which is good for them because then they get to spend more time, eating out of trash cans or eating food off the ground rather than flying away every time that they, are startled by a person. They just don't have time to keep running away, especially in New York City where there are just so many people. So what does this all mean? Well, we think reduced FIDs are flight initiation distances in birds, lizards, squirrels, whatever. They're one of the clearest and most repeatable behavioral shifts in urban ecology. You find the same pattern in squirrels, in mice, in birds, in lizards. And that suggests that populations are adapting in a similar way to a similar selection pressure. And as an evolutionary biologist, that's really interesting to us because we're always trying to understand to what degree is evolution repeatable. Uh, these results, these shared results across different taxonomic groups, this has an effect on species distributions and what kinds of animals can survive in the city. If you don't learn that humans aren't threatening to you, then you're not going to do well in a city setting because you're going to constantly be running away from people and you won't have time to do the things that matter, like forage for food and find mates. Um, so the other, big thing here is that flight initiation distance, this behavior, we know from decades of research that there is a heritable component to this. And again, these consistent urban rural differences mean that we are, seeing evolution happening quickly and, similarly across the globe. And then understanding flight initiation distance has conservation implications because it can help managers determine, people buffer zones around nesting sites or sensitive habitats. I can especially think about this for birds, right? And you see it for sea turtles too. They protect, nests and things like that for birds that are just like, or turtles that are really skittish of people. Um, so yeah, it can help us, design better conservation programs, but also, potentially eventually help design our cities better around species of concern. I want to talk to you about like a physiology thing that my lab is interested in. So we know that cities tend to be hotter than surrounding habitat. This is something called the urban heat island effect. Um, this is interesting in the context of urban lizards because lizards are ectothermic. And again, they have to behaviorally adjust their body temperature by moving around, right? Going in shade to cool down, basking in the sun to heat up. And so we want to know, how do lizards deal with these hotter temperatures in cities? And we're studying this in new cities and ancient cities to also understand how quickly can lizards evolve in response to this. So we're using the Scalopris occidentalis, those blue bellies. Uh, they're a native California species in our new cities, and we're using Podarcis earharti, this native Greek species, in ancient cities. So again, we know a lot about lizard thermoregulation in response to heating, right? They seek shade to cool, they bask to heat up, but we know less about how they use water to help themselves cool down, their hydrophysiology. Lizards don't sweat, neither do birds, but they can evaporatively cool, and they can do it through panting. They can lose water through their eyes to the environment, but they can also lose it through their skin. It's called cutaneous water loss. And again, it's not sweating. They don't have those types of glands, but they can lose water through their skin to the environment and help them cool down. So here we wanted to know, do urban lizards allow more water to move from their body and into the environment to cool down? And how fast does this evolve? We think they do because, one, cities have more water around, right? We divert a lot of water from other areas to cities. This is especially true in hot Mediterranean environments like California and Greece, that cities have more water around them than the surrounding natural habitat that is very often dry. So if there's more water around, the lizards are under less pressure to conserve it. So it would be advantageous for them to use that water to evaporatively cool. So we measured their water loss through their skin with this little water wand here. You can barely see it, but that's a lizard there being held down. And the wand, you press it on their back and it forms a vacuum seal. And it just measures how much water is leaving the skin of the lizard up into the water wand. And so we measured lizards from new and ancient cities and their surrounding natural areas, right, to compare them to. And then to see how hydrated they are, we also took a blood sample from them to measure their hematocrit. And what we found is that these urban lizards are actually really good at beating the heat. They do have higher evaporative water loss. That's the graph you're seeing over here. So this is, you can think of as you move up the y-axis here, more water is being lost from the body. So you can see urban lizards have higher water loss than non-urban lizards. And the urban lizards were also more hydrated, even though they let more water from their bodies go to the environment. So cities may not be all bad, right? They could be oases for certain resources for lizards. And this is happening in new and ancient cities. We found the same pattern in both of these lizards. So this type of physiological adaptation is happening quickly. And we've done experiments bringing them back into the lab, and we put these lizards in dry treatments and wet treatments to see how they respond. And in the ancient city lizards, they're very fixed in their traits. Whereas in the lizards from the newer cities, they're less fixed for this. They can adjust their water loss a little bit more. So we call that like a little bit more plastic. So again, this is like really cool evidence for evolution happening, right? Like it's either you have a little bit more lability at first, but then you evolve a trait and you evolve a strategy and it becomes, you know, less plastic, less variation in that trait. And so I did a little bit of research. I was wondering, what about birds? So urban birds, if you think about it, have plenty of water sources to help them cool down. You see them in bird baths on hot days. This is one of the strategies that they use, right? To cool down. And also, I found that, and this is important for both birds and lizards, one of their food sources, insects, there's a huge study done. Insects are also more hydrated in cities and hotter climates. So even if a bird isn't, you know, drinking more water in cities, they are getting more water in their diet already, if they're insectivorous, that is, which I thought was really cool. So what does this mean? Again, like cities aren't all bad, right, for organisms. There are opportunities there for them. They could be important oases in hotter climates, like San Diego, where the surrounding habitat is just very dry, and there isn't a lot of water around, either in the diet or to drink, um, in the environment. We found this means that animals are adjusting quickly and adapting quickly to abundance in a resource. And eventually, this trait evolves. And this reduced physiological stress that the lizards are under could have health benefits for them in cities and potentially help them increase their activity time, which allows them to get more food, more opportunity for mates, and things like that. The last sort of data collection empirical project I wanted to share with you is how we're investigating how urbanization influences how geckos are shaped. And so here we're looking at these two different widespread introduced non-native geckos in San Diego. On the left, Hemidactylus tursicus. This is the Mediterranean house gecko. They're very common all throughout California. They're introduced everywhere. And the one on the right, Tarantola mauritanica, or the Moorish gecko, also from the Mediterranean. And what we wondered is if these geckos are like the anoles I showed you at the beginning of the presentation, would they evolve larger adhesive toe pads? So, you know, geckos, they have these really cool toe pads that allow them to cling to walls, even ceilings, okay? That's how sticky they are. So we thought that they would evolve larger toe pads in cities to better cling to smooth artificial surfaces that are more common in cities. So this is what we think is going to happen. As urbanization increases, toe pad size will increase. And so how do you measure this? We capture geckos and we take pictures of their toe pads and then we measure the length on the computer, the width, and the number of these little lamellae there. Okay, those are the little skin folds there on the toe pad. And what did we find? We found indeed that these geckos do have more lamellae on their digits. It's not necessarily that the toe pad has gotten bigger in width, but that there are more of those lamellae. And that we know from research in other labs that more lamellae mean that you can cling better to smoother surfaces. So birds don't have toe pads, but I did look up how their body shape is responding to urbanization. And what I found is that birds often evolve shorter wings in cities. And this is thought to help them with their maneuverability and specifically to better have like a rapid takeoff. And this seems like it could be advantageous in a cluttered city environment where you have traffic coming at you very fast. There are tall buildings and trees interspersed with the buildings and pedestrians around. So having that shorter wing shape can help you maneuver better and more quickly in that environment. And this is actually research done on dark-eyed juncos in Southern California out of a lab at UCLA, Pamela J. Ye's lab. I just wanted to plug a really cool new project that my lab is embarking on because, you're interested in birds, but maybe you're out there in nature and using iNaturalist and interested in other, taxonomic groups to observe when you're out looking for birds. So this is a community science project that we're doing, looking at how urbanization influences snake evolution. And we're trying to get help from community scientists. So these are some flyers that we've put up all around urban canyons in San Diego in different parks. And it says, see a snake, let us know. And it has a QR code that you can click to, and it'll take you to an iNaturalist project page that we've started. And the idea here is that snakes are really hard to find, you guys. You just have to be lucky. And of course, I mean, as a herpetologist, I say lucky. Some people seeing a snake on the trail is like their worst nightmare. But snakes are elusive, they're secretive, really hard to find. And so we're trying to leverage the power of iNaturalist to help us get photos of snakes all around San Diego County so we can study different aspects of their movement, their behavior, and their population health. We can get a lot of data from these photos. So if you're on iNaturalist and at all interested in this, this is our project page. If you type into iNaturalist San Diego Urban Snake Project, you'll find us. You can join the group, um, and we'll send you, when you're a part of the group, a little color card here that you can put in your pictures of snakes that you take. Because the idea here is, you can see the picture on the right, our goal is to study all different things about these snakes across the urban-rural gradient. So we can, from this photo, we can tell what color the snake is, its size, because we know the size of the color card, what kind of habitat it's in, all sorts of things. And this is in collaboration with another lab at San Diego State, Dr. Rulon Clark, and we have lots of different students from undergrads to grad students working with these data. So if you're interested, you just join the iNat project, you complete a little training that we give you. It's a safety training regarding like snakes and venomous snakes and how to be, respectful to the snakes, and safe yourself. Once you complete the training, you get one of these color cards sent to you in the mail and you can start participating. So if you're a snake lover, do join the project. In addition to iNaturalist, we're also teaming up with snake wrangler groups across San Diego County to acquire DNA samples. So we get this from taking a little blood sample from the snake before the snake gets relocated. If anyone's not familiar with snake wrangler groups, this is like a phone number that you can call, and one of our students, all of our students are heavily involved in this. Our students and community members who are highly trained in venomous snake handling will come out to your house for totally free and move the snake out of your yard and into a canyon or like the nearest by natural area. Before we release the snake, we just take a blood sample, we get their DNA, and we're studying how things like roads and urban infrastructure are influencing snake population connectivity throughout the landscape. So this is a brand new project we're just getting off the ground. With that, I want to thank everybody who's involved in this research at San Diego State. We're really passionate about getting students involved in the research from undergrads to grad students. So everything that I showed you today was done by SDSU students and myself, though all the SDSU students are in blue. And then some professors there, collaborators are in black, and of course, the people that fund my research. And thank you all very much for listening to a herpetologist tell you about urban reptiles. Hopefully, you learned something fun about lizards, but also about birds too. Happy to take any questions. And yeah, thank you again for listening.
Well, thank you, Kinsey. That was very, very interesting.
Oh,
And,
good.
and I'm looking at the comments. If people have any questions, you can either raise your hand now or type it into the chat page. I did see a message here from Patty and Bruce that if you don't already know Jeff Nordland, you may want to. He's a local San Diego herpetologist.
Okay, Nordland. Thank
Yes.
you. I'll write that down. I'm still meeting people. There are
On this
tons of
one.
herpetologists in Southern California.
Yeah. I want to write a chat. How do I do a chat? Oh, yeah.
Jeff, thank you. Patty, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so one other cool thing about just a comment about urbanization and evolution is that Anna's hummingbirds in a few decades the shape of their bill has changed and gotten longer and larger in response to bird feeders. But also, I had a question about like one of your first slides.
Mhm.
So where did dinosaurs fit in on that evolutionary tree?
I was gonna mention it. Okay, so can I go back? Oh, end of slideshow. One sec. That was all the way back at the beginning there. So dinosaurs would fit in between crocs and birds.
Okay.
Um, and interestingly, and I love telling my herpetology students about this, we're still not quite certain where turtles fall in that phylogeny. There is a whole bunch of there are a whole bunch of researchers who are paleontologists, molecular biologists, turtle biologists, all working together to try to figure that out because the fossils that we have don't tell the same story as the DNA. And so, which is true? We don't have all the DNA data that ever existed. We don't have a perfect fossil record. So it's still a little bit of a mystery. So yeah, dinosaurs would fall somewhere in here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think Kathy Knight, I think you have a question.
I do. Um, how do I do it?
You can just ask it
Yeah, I can hear you.
verbally.
Oh, you
Yes.
can hear me?
Yes.
I I was walking down the street and it was a really hot day and the asphalt was just really, really hot and there was this poor
Yep.
lizard on it. And I wondered when they start to suffer heat stress because I
Yeah.
mean, this poor little guy he had to be really hot.
Yeah.
Has
Okay.
there been research on that? And in
Ton
urban areas versus being in the grass?
Yes, tons of research. In fact, before I was at San Diego State, I did my postdoc on this subject where I was
Oh,
looking at both the thermal physiology. So, what is the absolute maximum temperature that these lizards can stand? And then going out and measuring the environment and trying to figure this out, right? Like, where's the mismatch? Is it too hot in urban
I
environments
guess I
based on how how hot the lizards can handle it? So we study this. It's called the
briefly.
critical thermal maximum. People do this in birds, they do it in lizards, they do it in all sorts of animals. But basically, you put a lizard in a chamber, you heat it by 1 degree per minute Celsius. And the point at which the lizard can no longer flip itself over, that's its critical thermal maximum. It can no longer physiologically function. Um, the experiment doesn't kill the animals when you have to be very careful and highly trained to do it. Um, but what I found was that that trait wasn't different across the urban-rural gradient. And it turns out that trait is rarely different within species across different environments because heat tolerance, it's just not evolutionarily labile. There are just hard physical
Dang.
limits to our
Cautious.
proteins misfolding and no longer being able to function. So, like, there's not a lot of variation in humans in this trait, right? We have a set critical thermal maximum and we stop functioning at it. The same is for reptiles, for birds, for many other taxa. However, our critical thermal minimums do differ. So that trait, there's a little bit of wiggle room there for within species, there's variation in the minimum temperature that they can handle. And that's true across lizards, snakes, birds, etc. So, yes, a lot of work has been done on that, but so far nobody's found a difference in urban versus rural animals and their critical thermal maximum, though their temperature preferences do differ. So, the temperature at which they prefer to be at differs across urban and rural populations, both in birds and in different lizards, etc. There's been quite a bit of research on that. I see Kim's hand, Kim C.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. That was a great presentation. Thank you. And just had a question regarding your iNaturalist project. We were
Hmm.
camping recently and saw like a baby rattlesnake. It was roadkill, like on the
Oh,
road
bummer. Yeah.
campground. Does your project like accept photos of dead snakes? Oh, it
We
doesn't.
do, yeah. And we take photos even without the color standards here. We're interested in where snakes are on the landscape, right? Broadly. We can get some data from iNaturalist photos without the color standard. We can't get size, we can't get like a good approximation of color, but we can look at what habitat it's in. We get a GPS coordinate of where the animal is from, so we can extract environmental data from that observation. So yeah, we do take roadkill observations. We would just love it if you would put, and this is like in the little training thing that we have on the project, but if you just put that it's roadkill, that's good for us to know in case we can't tell from the photograph. We just like to keep that in mind for different analyses that the students will do downstream. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I can see the chat now.
I see that Emmy, I
Mhm.
believe, has a question. Emmy, can you unmute yourself to ask the question?
Yeah, hi, thank you.
Mhm.
My question is similar to what someone else put in. What is your criteria to distinguish between adaptation versus evolution? Because I could understand if the geckos develop larger pads, that is evolution.
Mhm.
But the fact that a lizard lets go more water from its body seems like it could be an intuitive or learned thing, not evolution.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's why we did the follow-up plasticity experiments. So, where we bring them into the lab and we put them in different treatments, right? We put them in a dry treatment and a wet treatment, and we try to see, can they adapt and change to this new condition? And so, evidence for evolution is that they can't quickly adapt and change. And evidence for it being a learned behavior would be that, the lizard that we took out of a dry environment and put into a wet environment, it adapted to that and vice versa. Um, you know, Catching evolution red-handed is hard to do without genetic data. But that's also a trait that, there's not just one gene in the genome that is like, okay, that's the water loss trait.
Mhm.
Evaporative water loss is probably under the control of many different genes across the genome. And we're not so good at understanding those very genetically complex traits yet. That's something that is like we can find genes across the genome associated with this trait, but whether or not we really know that how much it's contributing and if it is contributing, that's the science of the future. And that's something that like Drosophila biologists or like fly biologists are doing with CRISPR because they can easily go in and just edit a gene out and say, "Oh, okay, well that function stopped." Or, "Oh, their eyes changed color when I took that gene away." So we know that that's what that gene does. Hard to do with lizards. People have, one study has found a single gene that can like make lizards turn albino, right? So that's a very simple genetic trait. But to try to do that with water loss, whew, yeah, I don't know. We're not there yet. But yeah, that is exactly why we did those follow-up experiments, right? It's just it lends more evidence that it's evolution, but yeah, we don't know the genetics behind that trait yet. So better to call it adaptation. Mhm.
Yes, right. That's all you've done.
Yep.
And it looks like our last question, and this I have to say, this is one that I have thought about for years. Why do lizards do push-ups?
Oh, I saw that in the chat. Yes. Okay. So interesting. We have a group of lizards all throughout Southern California that do this, right? And they all belong to the family Phrynosematidae. The bluebellies do it, the side blotch lizards do it. They're all in that family. But not all lizards do this, including the wall lizards that I showed you. They do not do that behavior. Um, they do it for a couple different reasons. One, we have evidence that the number and like frequency of push-ups is tied to testosterone.
Mhm.
So the more like testosterone that they have flowing in the blood, the more push-ups they can do in a shorter amount of time. Like there have been different experiments that have shown that. So it can be a sign of aggression. It can also be a sign, like a sexual signal. So it could be a signal to a potential mate, like, "Hey, I'm really strong, look at me." They also use it, so they do the push-ups, but then they also combine it with the coloration on their bodies. So they have those blue bellies, right? When they do the push-ups, it shows the blue belly underneath. And that's also a sexual signal, right? Like, "Oh, look at my bright blue belly. Look at how fit I am. Mate with me. I'm very flashy." So it's one signal that can have multiple different meanings. We don't fully understand the language of lizards yet, right? So it depends not only on the lizard doing it, but who the receiver of the signal is. If a male lizard is doing that to another male lizard, it could be a signal saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm big and strong, you're coming into my territory, don't mess with me." Whereas if the receiver of this signal is a female, it could be, "Hey, I'm big and strong. I'm very brightly colored. I have a lot of testosterone flowing right now because it's mating season. Come into my territory. Let's mate." So not all lizards do it. And it can mean different things depending on who they're signaling to. And sometimes, like, you can be walking around hiking and they'll do it to you. Very aggressive behavior, if you ask me, taking on a full-size human.
Interesting. I've never noticed that they're doing it in response to humans.
Oh yeah, I've been like
Yeah.
out lizard catching with my students and I'll like be going toward them with a pole and they'll start doing push-ups and
Oh
it's
my
very
gosh.
funny.
Well, before we wrap up, Gail had a question of asking that you repeat the iNaturalist project info. She could not find
Oh,
it on the
yeah, it's called San Diego Urban Snake Project. San Diego Urban Snake Project. Sorry if I can't select a slide. I have to, go through the whole thing here.
right.
Sorry about that.
Well,
Oh,
maybe
there.
oh, there, perfect.
Hmm.
Okay. And any other questions before we let Kinsey get back to her baby? Hopefully the baby's asleep.
Yeah, I think I only heard him once. That's good.
Well, I really appreciate you all being here tonight, and I do want to let you know that everyone did vote yes for the full board of directors. So we got 20 out of 20 that voted yes. So we've got the board of directors set for the next year. And thank you very much, Kinsey. I really appreciate it. It was fantastic
Thank
talk.
you so much. Yeah, and if anybody ever has any questions about, you know, urbanization, evolution, bird stuff, whatever, lizard stuff, feel free to email me. You can find my website if you just type my name into the search.
Oh, yeah. By the way, she has a very cool website. So if anybody
Oh,
is
thank you.
interested in learning more about Kinsey and her work, and also just who she is as a person, I thought your art involvement was very interesting also.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, everybody. Anybody have anything else they need to say before we go?
It's not there.
All righty. I think that we have one more presentation for the sun, and then we'll be off for the summer. So the next presentation is June 17th. And we'll be hearing from Danielle Parsons, who's with the Escondido Creek Conservancy. So that should be another interesting presentation. So thank you very much, Kinsey. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Mm. It's not there. Okay.
Did you need something? Whoever's talking, I'm not sure.
Oh, Deborah, it's Gail. I just was looking for that
Oh, the
San Diego snake, and it's not. I just am scrolling on my phone while I
Oh,
look at
okay.
this on my iPad, and it doesn't come up as a project on iNaturalist.
Okay, well, I will let her know. I will actually send her an email right now. And
Yeah, that would be great because
yeah.
there is a long list of projects that you can sign on to for
Oh,
iNaturalist,
yes,
and
yes.
I did not see that listed.
Okay, well, good. That's good to know.
Yeah,
I'll let her know and get back. I will get back to you with.
yeah, or tell her to just send me the
Yeah,
information.
that
That would
would
be
be
fine
great.
as well.
Yes, because I will
Okay,
be gone for a couple of weeks. I may not be hot
yeah.
on my email. Okay,
Okay, thanks,
thanks a
Deborah.
lot. Uh-huh.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.